Hey gang, Mark LeBlanc welcoming you back to the Alley Cat Workshop. This is the third video in a series that I'm doing on how I'm rebuilding my bench. So the first video that I did, I shot that this past summer, was how I rebuilt the top of my bench using Douglas fir. The second video was how I installed two vices. I didn't show you how I installed the front vise, but the tail vise, I worked through all that process with you. Now, this third episode is how I'm preparing the top of my workbench and the top of my vices to accept bench dogs. So back in August, I ordered Veritas bench dogs, and they finally came in December, just before Christmas. Today is January 2nd, by the way, just so that you can situate yourself in time. Here's what they look like. They come in packs of 2. And they are 1.75 inches long. The body itself is 1.25 inches long. The head is 1/2 inch. And the body itself is circular, and it's roughly under 3/4 inch. And on the head, there is a flat face that enables you to secure your workpiece. And once you put in your 3/4 inch holes for the bench dogs, they fit in perfectly. And I've tried them on my tail vise, secured in a piece of wood, and it's really rock solid. Great. They took a while to show up, that's it. All right, so the plan that I have is I want to drill a series of 6 bench holes, or holes, 6 lines, if you wish, of holes about 5 inches apart, like that's roughly the distance, and put corresponding holes on the vices so that I can use the vices properly. Now, what I'm using in terms of tool, I have here a plunge router. It's a Triton plunge router, and I've installed in there let me bring this down, a 3/4 inch plunge bit. This is a very aggressive bit. And it is, with the plunge router, just drill it right down. It bores a hole very quickly. So quickly, I'll talk to you about my initial test. So this is a piece of 2x4. I clamped this in my front vise, and I tried to drill a hole. Here it is, right in this piece of 2x4, using this tool and using the bit. And in under a second, I mean, it was almost instantaneous. Started the router, plunged it, and that was it. It was done. The hole was bored, which got me thinking. It's a little bit intimidating to use a tool with such power in this case that, I've got this bench. I worked a lot of hours and spent a lot of money to get this top done. I don't want to screw it up. I want this to be in really good shape. So after this initial test, what I decided to do was to build a jig. So here's jig number 1. Let me describe what this is all about. So it's a scrap piece of 1/4 inch plywood. I've got a backer at the back so that I can line it up against the face of my workbench. And what I've installed are 3 of these plates. And I used a circle cutting jig on my bandsaw to cut out the circles so that my drill, or not my drill, but my router, the base fits perfectly in there. So it won't move. It's going to be solid. All I need to do is clamp this jig to the table, and then I can do my 3 holes in succession. Now, I mentioned 3. Why not 3? Why not 6? Or why 3 and why not 6? The simple reason is these base plates took a little bit too much room, so I was limited to putting only 3. So this system worked out really well. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to build another jig for the other set of holes that I want to drill. So I've got another piece of scrap 1/4 inch plywood. It's still a little too long for this, so let me just take a quick measurement. I'm going to leave a couple of inches overhang over here, so I got 3 inches. That should be more than enough. And when I go slightly beyond the end of the vise, again, let's do 3 inches. Make a mark here, so let me cut that off to begin with, and that's what we'll use. Next step, I need to install the stopper, so I've got a scrap piece of pine here. Here's my my guide, so let's put some glue on the face. Alright. Put that roughly here. I'm going to clamp one side. Use my square. Alright, a couple of brads. Alright, now I can move on to the next step. Alright, so how am I going to place my blocks? I've already placed the first one, so let me walk you through the process with the second one. This is the, on the top, I've marked out with an X the center of this board on the top of my bench. I want my dog holes to be right in the middle of this board, not on a seam between two boards. So that's pretty important because that'll be a really solid joint. Now my plywood is 7.5 inches wide, 7 3/4, sorry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roughly place it so that my measuring tape is lined up with the middle of this board, and I'm going to go to 3 7/8, mark it with point, and confirm that with my awl, just so that I get a reference point. I'm going to use my drill, and I'm going to start the hole a little bit, just present it. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my block. I'm going to take the circle part and go behind. You'll see this is the hole of the screw head on the center the jig. I'm going to use my drill again, and I'm going to pierce this right through. All right. Now, I'm going to put in 1 1/4 inch screw and just present the tip so that the tip is protruding a little bit in the back. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this and find the hole. Let me do it this way here. There you go. I found the hole as to where the center of this circle goes, and all I need to do is place the rest of the jig in place. With hot glue, this is going to be secure, and I'll be able to use this jig for with my router. This is easy. All right, so off camera, I thought about how do I line up my jig with the existing holes so that the new holes that I pierce are going to be all right. And then I thought of drilling 3/4 inch holes in my new jig, so that would allow me to use my bench dogs and line it up properly this way. Now I'm ready to glue my stencils in place and then we'll be able to cut our holes. This is going to work perfect. So that was a bit of a scary moment. As it turns out, as I removed my router, the bit had become loose. It's never happened to me, but that's a pretty scary event. Another reason why you should never raise your router before it's actually stopped. So I've reset everything. The bit is secured again in the router. Hopefully this time it holds. I took the time to clean up the router bit since it was out at that point. I'm going to re-drill this particular hole and then keep going. Anyways, we should be okay now. So you probably guessed by the different light in the shop and by the fact that I'm wearing a different shirt that we're not the same day that I started filming this. We're in fact the 3rd of January now. And I think it's time to put a stop to this project, put it on hold for now. I did a little bit of research overnight and this morning, and one of the common themes that I read was a dull bit makes for very bad cuts. And what you saw in the video is actually cuts that were not very pleasant to the ear and certainly not very pleasant to do. So this afternoon early, I came back into the shop, took the bit out of the router and sharpened it. At least tried to sharpen it, and the results were pretty conclusive. It just wasn't enough. So I'm getting some cuts, but in this case I'm not getting so many chips as I'm getting dust flying out of the holes. And the second thing is I'm smelling a burnt smell, which means that the bit isn't cutting anymore. It's just not sharp enough to do the job. This bit wasn't cheap. It was about 80 bucks Canadian. And from the looks of it, unless I can find somebody that can professionally sharpen this and it's worth it, then I'm probably going to have to buy another bit at some point and finish up the top of the desk or the workbench, which is a bit of a pain, a bit of a drag. All right, so I'm going to put an end to this, but before I go, a couple of things that I want to mention, pros and cons. First pro. The jig system that I built was, I think, pretty clever, and it worked out pretty well. The other thing too is on the second jig, if you recall there's 2 of them, on the second jig I actually bored some holes so that I could use my dogs to secure the second jig in place and actually keep it lined up with the original holes as well. I thought that was pretty clever and that worked out pretty well. A con. First one is dust collection. So this Triton router comes with a dust extraction port, which is this guy right here. Fits right in here on the side. Why am I not using it? Because this end here is the exact same size as the hose on my my shop vac, which means that they don't fit. So I need to buy an attachment to get these 2 joined. Simple, easy fix. And certainly it would have helped a lot, because let me tell you, every time I'm drilling a hole, there's a lot of dust, a lot of chips that are flying all over the place, and it's becoming a little bit of a pain. So certainly something to do for the next time. And the second thing is the router bit. I'm disappointed, as again, this was an expensive bit to buy, and I drilled maybe, what, 60 holes or so, mostly in the Douglas fir, 6 of them in the maple jaws of, or the jaws of my vices, which are made of maple. And I know it's a hardwood, but you would figure that a bit of that quality would work well. This is a high-speed steel bit. Carbide I know is better, but I haven't found a carbide bit that has got the same size, 3/4 of an inch. So, is there better out there? Hopefully there is. Maybe buy a smaller bit. Use a system of collars as opposed to this type of jig. You know, you could still make a similar type of jig, but actually have collar holes instead of having the base being secured. Anyways, different ways of doing it. Maybe that would have been a better approach. All right, that's it for today, folks. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you soon.